Why are elitists compelled to force everyone else to live by the rules they make up? Is it the desire to control everything? Well, it could be. Or maybe there are deeper forces at work here. Stay tuned for our editorial segment where we knit together the work of an economist and a theologian to propose an answer to those questions. Welcome to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours, a place to discuss world events which impact our Christian walk and our spiritual journey, and where sometimes these discussions have sharp edges. Hello, and welcome back to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours. I'm your host, Chaplain Warren, and we have a wide variety of stories on our radar screen today. So let's jump right into the lead story from CBN News. The World Health Organization held its 77th World Health Assembly May 27th to June 1st. As CBN News reported, WHO leaders were unable to reach an agreement for a controversial pandemic-related treaty during the assembly. However, it did pass new international health regulations called IHRs in order to accomplish largely the same thing. Of special interest is IH Article 35, because Article 35 details the requirements of health documents, including those in digital format. The system of digital health documents is consistent with, and in our opinion, a precursor to the digital IDs described by the World Economic Forum. According to the WEF, people will need a digital ID to access health care insurance and treatment, open bank accounts and carry out online transactions, to travel, to access humanitarian services, to shop and conduct business transactions, to participate in social media, to pay taxes, vote, collect government benefits, own a communication device, such as a cell phone or a computer. In other words, if you haven't caught on yet, individuals will need digital IDs to access almost every aspect of civilized society. All of our actions taken with the use of digital IDs will be tracked and traced. If we step out of line, we can be punished by, for example, being severed from our bank accounts and credit cards, similar to what happened to Canadian truckers in the winter of 2022. Digital IDs are a form of mass surveillance and totalitarian control. Does that sound just a little bit like the Book of Revelation and the Mark of the Beast? Oh, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. All right, let's take a look and see what else is on our radar screen for this week. Okay, story number 2 from the National Catholic Register. Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation, makes the case that Generation Z is experiencing unprecedented rates of anxiety and depression, largely due to the revolutionary impact of smartphones and social media. According to the NCR, writer Ashley McGuire, children today are conditioned to be on smart devices from toddlerhood, and Haidt paints a disturbing picture as to how it is reshaping childhood for the worse and causing a mental health epidemic among children and teens. Haidt documents, with extensive research from social scientists and psychologists, the way that free play, emphasis being on the word free, is essential to healthy development for children. You know, remember the way we used to go out and play? But the crackdown on free play and the proliferation of smartphones means that instead of being let loose wild into the yard, children today are let loose in what he calls the Wild West of the virtual world, where threats to children abound. He writes, to take one example of our short-sightedness, A powerful fear for many parents is that their child will fall into the hands of a sexual predator. But criminals nowadays spend most of their time in the virtual world because the internet makes it so much easier to communicate with children and to find and circulate sexual and violent videos involving children. One of hate's central premises is that we are overprotecting our children in the real world while underprotecting them online. Absolutely incredible. If we really want to keep our children safe, he says, we should delay their entry into the virtual world and send them out to play in the real world instead. Well, I tell you, one hopes the pediatric medical profession just might become a staunch advocate for this type of thinking. All right, story number 3 on the radar screen from Christian Post. Slightly more than 1/4 of NFL teams haven't made any reference to Pride Month this year. You know, the June thing? NFL teams whose X or Twitter accounts have not brought up anything related to Pride Month in the past week are the Atlanta Falcons, Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, Dallas Cowboys, Kansas City Chiefs, Miami Dolphins, New Orleans Saints, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Tennessee Titans. A survey from Bloomberg published in 2023 found that references to Pride Month in filings, presentations, and transcripts from April to June at more than 900 of the largest U.S. companies dropped almost 40% from this time last year, the first decline in 5 years. Target saw its stock plummet last year after the big box store plugged an LGBT pride collection and a tuck-friendly swimsuit designed to make it easier for trans-identified men to conceal their genitalia while wearing women's swimsuits. Oh gosh, well that's kind of something you can't unsee. Target temporarily lost $9.3 billion in market value and recorded a 12.6% drop in stocks as a result of the backlash to its efforts to advance LGBT ideology. Well, as the old saying goes, go woke, go broke. And now finally, for our good news story this edition, from CBN News also, a federal court in Colorado ruled June 4th that the state's decision to exclude Catholic preschools from receiving funding was unconstitutional. Yay! Beckett Law, a nonprofit legal group, filed a federal lawsuit against Colorado last August on behalf of 2 Catholic preschools to protect the ability of families who send their children to Catholic schools to participate in the state's universal preschool program. Denver's Department of Early Childhood provides funding for 15 hours per week of free preschool to the more than 40,000 families attending private, public, and faith-based preschools in Colorado. However, it denied that benefit to families who sent their children to St. Mary Catholic Parish and St. Bernadette's Catholic preschools because the preschools asked staff and families to share their religious beliefs. The staff at both schools are required to sign annual contracts that affirm their willingness to uphold Catholic teaching on issues including life, marriage, and sexuality. In addition, families agree that they understand the Catholic Church stance on such matters. St. Mary Catholic Parish and St. Bernadette's Catholic preschools serve low-income families. Nearly 85% of the families who attend St. Bernadette Parish preschool are eligible for free or reduced lunch, and 25% of St. Mary's preschoolers receive tuition discounts or scholarships, according to the Archdiocese of Denver. In a 101-page opinion, the court explained that Colorado's efforts to exclude the schools because they required families to share their beliefs created an unworkable scheme that breaches the appropriate limits on state power. Wow, that should be in all capital letters. And they did not provide enough compelling interest for excluding the schools. Well, that's it for our stories today. The editorial segment is up next after this very important message. Do you find the Bible hard to understand? Does it not seem to speak to you in your life? I would like to point you to Andrew Wommack Ministries as a place to see biblical instruction like you may have never seen it before. Andrew has been teaching biblical truth straight from Scripture for 50 years. If you're seeking to experience the power of God's Word in your life, click on his website link in our show notes. Many of the resources on his website are absolutely free. And now for our editorial segment, let's head down into the Chaplain's secret secure bunker, hidden deep below the rolling hills of northwest Alabama. Are all doors secure?
Yes, sir, and perimeter security is activated.
And welcome to our editorial segment. It's perfectly safe to be here today because we have both Eddie the guard dog and Dixie the guard cat on duty. The World Health Organization lead story we talked about is a chilling one, especially in light of all the corruption we experienced in the manufactured COVID-19 pandemic of a few short years ago. Ultimately, what the World Health Organization is seeking is to install a globally coordinated government function which is all about subverting our sovereign and constitutional rights along the line of what we see in the European Union government. And this type of subversion in the medical field is not the only story of this sort. Let me give you a quick recap of a story from Houston. Texas Children's Hospital, the largest such hospital in the country, has been a leader in providing transgender hormones to minors. After the Texas Attorney General deemed this child abuse, and after the Texas legislature passed a bill banning this procedure, the Children's Hospital promised to stop the practice. A medical resident at the hospital, Ephraim, provided evidence to authorities the hospital in fact did not stop the procedures after the Texas AG's ruling. Did someone investigate the hospital? Oh no. The result is federal agents showed up at Dr. Haim's house as part of an investigation into him, not the hospital. Neither the Federal Department of Justice nor Children's Hospital would comment on the investigation. Dr. Haim finished his residency in Houston and is now a general surgeon in Dallas. Looking back on the investigation of him, Dr. Haim remarked, and I quote, "You go to medical school to protect patients from disease. You never imagine that you would protect patients from the hospital," unquote. Ironic words indeed. So what's going on here? Why do we see the relentless push in the medical field to elevate ideology over common sense medical care? Why do we see a globalization of ideology promoted by the elitist few, be it in the health field or in any other arena of government? Why do powerful elitists believe they are called to tell the rest of us how to live our lives? Well, way back in the 1990s, talk show radio host Rush Limbaugh proposed that every liberal, progressive, and leftist issue was fundamentally about control. Be it climate change, food, water, automobile gas mileage, you name it. The underlying dynamic was a perverse need for control. When I first heard that proposition, it seemed to make perfect sense. And so it is a Rushbo saying that I have used thousands of times in talking about all the contentious political issues we've dealt with for the last 30 plus years. More recently, I've come to realize that although Rush was correct in his analysis as far as it went, it really isn't the final answer. Or to say it differently, Control is not the final objective of the elitists. It is just the process for getting to the final objective. So, the $640,000 question is, what is the final objective? Now, some of you may be thinking that I said that wrong. Oh, Chaplain Warren, it's not the $640,000 question. It is the $64,000 question. Well, you are technically correct. I was just adjusting for inflation. You know, Bidenomics. The answer to what may be the underlying objective, which I've spent some time thinking about, comes from two unrelated books, one by an Anglican theologian and the other by a world-renowned economist. That almost sounds like the beginning of a really bad joke. You know, an Anglican theologian and an economist walked into a bar one day, but it's not a joke. The economist is Thomas Sowell, whom you've surely heard of. In a recent book called Social Justice Fallacies, he talks about a concept called consequential knowledge. Consequential knowledge is the knowledge that people like us use in everyday situations for making decisions in their lives that have tangible consequences for them. An example of a consequential knowledge decision is one to purchase a minivan instead of a compact car because I happen to have a wife and 5 children, which rules out owning the thriftier compact car. Now, another type of knowledge is what we can call academic knowledge. Knowledge which deals with overarching systems and is used to make decisions about those systems, which results in no tangible consequences to the decision maker, unlike consequential knowledge. An example of academic knowledge would be automotive engineering, for example, where we can determine that lighter, more aerodynamic automobiles will get better gas mileage. But there's no consequence for having said that to the decision maker. The conflict between these two types of knowledge, consequential and academic, comes where powerful elitists think they really have consequential knowledge and are willing to go to any lengths to force others to comply with their determinations, up to and including using the police power of the state to enforce their knowledgeable dictates. An example of this would be where a few unelected, powerful elitists in our federal government determine that everyone should drive electric vehicles. In order to ensure compliance with their decisions, they enact laws to slowly outlaw internal combustion cars and to provide elaborate tax incentives to support electric vehicles. And they do this because they believe their decisions are a matter of consequential knowledge, that having an electric vehicle is good for everyone. In reality, they do not have such consequential knowledge, and the everyday folks who drive to work, who want to take a family of 7 on a vacation, cannot possibly do so in the small aerodynamic electric vehicle that only goes 200 miles between charges, and by the way, can only seat 4 people and has virtually no room for luggage. But hey, too bad for the family of 7. It has been decreed what they can buy, and it's for everyone's good. Now, where have we encountered other such abuses of consequential and academic knowledge over the years? Well, think about those low-capacity toilets that don't flush. They're supposed to save water. And shower heads that spit a trickle of water out, also to save water. And what about expensive LED light bulbs, designed to save electricity and the planet at any cost? And what about your clothes washing machines that don't wash very well because they don't hardly use any water? And that's to save water, but you got to rewash the clothes about a half dozen times to get them clean. And hey, what about those refrigerators that don't last very long because they're designed to save electricity? And then there's the exotic and very expensive central HVAC units that are on the market now. Very expensive to repair. Oh, but they do save electricity. And then there's the more expensive Green Guard building materials to improve indoor air quality, to improve the quality of life. And of course, there's the electric vehicles. Okay, so I hope I've illustrated how the misapplication of academic knowledge as if it were consequential knowledge leads to the control mandates that Rush Limbaugh talked about. But what drives the elitist to be so consumed with shoving their lofty decisions for the rest of us down our throats with the police power of the state? Why don't they just take their money and go retire on some nice remote island and leave the rest of us alone? This is where the Anglican theologian comes in. In his recent book called Mortal Goods, Ephraim Radner, professor emeritus at Wycliffe College, talks about an 18th century philosophy that came out of the Enlightenment period, called among various names the philosophy of betterment. Betterment, for short, is a pagan philosophy that is supposed to give purpose to life by setting a goal that a person should leave the world a better place than it was when he or she entered it. It was one of the highlights of the Enlightenment period because it provided rationalization for the acquisition of knowledge, wealth, and power that exploded during the Enlightenment. Betterment was a tremendous achievement needed to solve a most pressing problem. And that problem is all human beings need to have a purpose in their lives. Christians have their purpose in the worship of God and the following of Jesus Christ. We use our knowledge, abilities, energy, and wealth to support God's kingdom here on earth. Pagans, before the Enlightenment, apparently had no similar altruistic purpose to animate and focus their energies. And so it can be said that betterment was an instant success. Now, betterment is called a pagan philosophy because there is no command for betterment in Christianity. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." In addition to that, Jesus tells us that the world will go away. It is not forever because it will make way for the new Jerusalem. The relationship of the Christian to the world is one of stewardship, not betterment. Because we are in the world, but we are not of the world. Even another way to say this is that there's nothing that we can add to God's gifts to make them ever more divine. So let's circle back to the beginning. Why was Rush Limbaugh right that in every liberal, progressive, and leftist issue you have the theme of control? Because control was and is the process used to obtain compliance with the elitist misuse of academic knowledge as consequential knowledge. And why was the elitist driven to have all of us comply on the threat of death? Because the philosophy of betterment finally gave justification and purpose to his life. And he was and is compelled to live into his purpose. So one final example here to try and wrap all this together into some kind of a coherent whole, I hope. Why the push on man-made climate change? Well, so that the elitist can fulfill his purpose to leave the world a better place than it was when he entered it. And so why the push on electric vehicles? Because the elitist believes they are more friendly to the earth, so everyone needs to do their part. And how will the elitists get compliance to use EVs? Well, by any means necessary, and that is the control part. I challenge you to pick any liberal, progressive, or leftist issue and work through the rubric I've just proposed. Please leave the results of your analysis in the comments section on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, or X. And if possible, try to educate an elitist. Program notes for this episode can be found on the Chaplain's Corner After Hours YouTube channel. You can leave your comments on the Chaplain's Corner After Hours YouTube channel, Facebook, Rumble, or on X, formerly Twitter. Until next time, just remember, God's in charge, and we know how the story ends.